Hello, welcome back to RP-0 America Approaching Mars. So in the last video, we went from our kind of Mars flyby trajectory, our Mars approach. We set a periapsis of 50 kilometers. I kind of described what was going on with this craft and its design and how it was behaving at the time. And now we are in the atmosphere. So it looks like of the three options of flyby and aero capture or some sort of landing, it looks like we're coming in for some sort of landing. So some part of our craft appears to be brutally crashing into the atmosphere, or into the planet there, fair enough. But our current craft is overheating in the mid-Martian atmosphere. So I'm trying to get it to come down a bit faster because I don't know why that package is overheating. I guess I know why. Because this shield, even though it's not hot enough to ablate, it's pretty hot. And so it's passing a lot of heat onto these other parts. So we might end up burning up. That's a very real possibility because we're not coming down very fast. We may end up burning up in the mid-Martian atmosphere, which, I mean, fair enough. That is a total possibility. If you spend too much time, just like with Earth's atmosphere in practice, if you spend too much time in the mid or upper atmosphere of a planet at high speed, you actually end up absorbing a ton of heat, whereas you want to either ablate it off or just deflect it using kind of your shock wave. So you don't want to spend too much time in this. So even though you think it might be nice for reducing the G-forces on your craft or your crew, you definitely don't want to spend very much time in this part, in these kind of upper mid parts of the atmosphere, because they cause your craft to experience very high temperatures, even if it's much of it is being conducted from the heat shield. So the heat shield is designed to survive this, but this avionics module is not. So it's getting hotter and hotter, and it could very well explode before it is done what I would consider its useful life. So we're coming down pretty fast now. I have already set up a time to impact indicator, which isn't perfectly accurate. One reason why it's not perfectly accurate, it kind of assumes a ballistic trajectory. So right now you'll see it not decreasing at 1 second per second. I can't quite see the edge of that bar. I think we might be getting ready for it to explode. I'm not, oh no, good, thank goodness. All right, so it may not explode on us, but it sure did get close. All right, so see here I'm generating upward force, so I'm actually decreasing our downward velocity quite a bit. And so this time is actually getting higher. So part of that is because we're slowing down, and part just in general, our velocity vector is becoming lower in magnitude. So we're gathering tons of science as we come down in the atmosphere, and we have also crossed over many biomes, which is awesome. And as I said, I believe a little unrealistic of me, unfortunately. I apologize for the accidental cheating and misbehavior. In reality, I'd like to have had a satellite in Mars orbit to basically relay this information back, because a probe like this I wouldn't expect, while it is traveling through the atmosphere of Mars like this, that it would be able to transmit information back to Earth. I'm considering and reconsidering remote tech. I was kind of holding out for the stock inclusion of kind of relay satellites, because I was hoping that would be a little more forgiving. But I also see a lot more people are kind of embracing remote tech, specifically excluding the time delay feature, because while very realistic and nice, the time delay feature just makes it just impractical to be able to control a craft. Which is fair enough. So maybe I'll go that route as well. Maybe I'll learn up remote tech and include it. But so far I have not been playing with remote tech. So anybody looking through this series, my tips may very well not work if you play with remote tech. You would have to have more antennas and kind of go through thought processes that I have not had to go through. So as we approach Mach 1, the heat shield has really done its job. Imagine how much velocity we have bled off with this heat shield. And so we're kind of preparing to drop it and switch over to using parachutes to hopefully slow us down sufficiently. So once we're around Mach 1, actually let me check, FAR will tell me, so there we go. I may as well keep that. Okay, so we'll basically, let's lose the heat shield. Okay, those popped, let's drop that off, there we go. Usually you kind of hope for the parachute to, it slowed us down, unrealistically slow, unfortunately. So I believe that's of the parachute that didn't take the values. So this is the parachute that did take the values that I set, and this other one did not. And I don't think, like, in flight, the real chutes is robust enough for me to be able to, say, change the values and pop it open. And even though, let me see, it says it has spare chutes, if I cut the chute, I don't think it will actually let me fire the chute again. Or at least in practice, I've never had luck with that. So in my test, I kind of wish, well, I would have had to kind of set up my physical environment differently to have successfully done this, but I kind of wish I had tested my original recording, because what happened with that is I popped the parachute too high so that this one didn't actually pop. So I got a bit of slowdown from this little one, and then later on I popped them both and actually slowed down and got a miraculous and totally unrealistic soft landing. So in practice here, we are really high in Mars's atmosphere. Mars's atmosphere is very thin. Does it tell us here? Atmospheric density. So this is as a percentage of Earth's atmospheric density. It is just really thin here. So I feel it's very unrealistic that we would be gradually gliding down here. And in part, I believe that's because this parachute has such a large canopy. So here's the one that didn't take my values. So if you just want a nice, easy, unrealistic landing on Mars, you can go ahead and just tell it you want to land at X speed, and it will give you a very large deploy diameter for your parachute. Also, please note, so my current mass, current craft is just under half a ton, and this parachute part itself is like, what, a third, a quarter of the total craft mass, so yeah, and I probably can't copy those dynamically, right? And I don't know if this copy command would actually work in flight. I think it makes sense, like that option, etc., to be in the VAB. But being here, I don't think I could actually copy those parameters over to the other chute. But anyway, these were the parameters that I wanted to set, and I'll see what I can do later to test an actual craft where I use those. Because I'd like to use parachutes, in part just because they were used realistically in a lot of historic craft. I just find that I really have trouble tuning the parachute values to be like realistic with real chutes. Like I can just basically give it an absolutely massive canopy that's multiple kilometers square kilometers of parachute for just 100 kilograms, which I believe is unrealistic. But regardless, I feel like it does make things too easy. So that's the real reason I don't want to do it. So anyway, I'm actually just going to cut this because I feel like I shouldn't get such an easy soft landing on my first attempt at Mars, because it's super unrealistic for a number of reasons, and I want a real challenge with my first soft landing of Mars. So you can look around and see everything. It's really nice here. Also, the craft, because of that parachute issue, I don't have control of the craft because one parachute being really heavy, one being what I wanted, I'm above the mass of the craft that I actually wanted. So anyway, Mars is gorgeous. Thank you, Kill Ashley, and Faison, Pingo Pete, Nathan Kell, everybody who's put all their work into kind of creating these things. And all I really do sometimes is test those things, provide feedback, merging them sometimes, etc. But man, Mars is amazing compared to the way it looked a year ago, right? Am I right or am I right? And even the lighting and atmosphere is just amazing in comparison to how it used to look. So let us cut this chute. All right, so I feel like this is a much more realistic process for this for this landing to have gone through. Much more realistic. So we're speeding up quite a bit. So this parachute will open up at some point. It will go to full deployment. Let me see. Toggle chute information. So I don't have control. So even though I have this engine on it, etc., which I'd love to use, which is why I added this real engine for an attempted soft landing, I won't be able to use it because I don't have avionic control of the craft, which is totally fair. So I don't imagine I can actually set this up. It may have actually accepted what I just set there. So it's going to have the best chance of slowing down. Oh, well, maybe it will be able to slow down. Yeah, I really want to find I want to be able to find the parameters so I can tune a landing to be like a real historic landing, where you do need to bleed off the last, say, 20 to 200 meters per second of velocity using actual engines, like I kind of was hoping to do here, where the parachutes kind of help slow you down from Mach 1.5 or Mach 0.8 or wherever they end up getting deployed realistically. But yeah, it looks like if this engine had been if I had ended up with 2 of the correct parachute, I may have been able to get a soft landing. But in practice, we hit the ground at about 20 meters per second, which is just too fast. So fair enough. We did successfully crash into Mars. So fair enough. That was pretty awesome. I'm quite pleased with what went on there. So let's see, Space Center. So for the rest of this video, let's see what I can fill with. So I have been doing a little bit of research. I've been getting a lot of good advice and suggestions. So thank you everybody who's commented on the YouTube of kind of where to go with things. Because I kind of described the options, what I'd like to, kind of the options I'm restricting to. I prefer not to just do a historic space program. I do like to look at various alt history options. Sorry, I'm just trying to make this module manager window go away, but I'm not sure which hotkey it is. I thought it would be oh, there we go. That'll do it. F11 was bringing one up, closing the other. Anyway, so I'm 35 days away. Let's just warp to that, since there's really nothing we're doing between now and then. Let electrics finish, which is awesome. So it's about the time that I would want to start planning what is my route towards the moon. And, do I want to just put people into the orbit of the moon? Do I want to put people on the surface of the moon? Do I want to put 1 person, 2 people? Do I want to do Earth orbit rendezvous? Do I want to do lunar orbit rendezvous? Those are not mutually exclusive options, by the way. You could do on-orbit construction and also an LOR, a lunar orbit rendezvous mission. You could combine those. Both of those options help you they do very different things. Whether you do, so Earth orbit rendezvous, doing construction in Earth orbit before you send things to the moon, and lunar orbit rendezvous means you don't send the whole craft down to the surface of the moon. And both of those allow you to break your payload into larger chunks. Or sorry, into smaller chunks. So that means you need a not as big of a launcher. Okay, so cluster stand. Let's see. I need to kind of clean up through this. So somewhere I should have the Gemini mission. There we go. So my most recent Gemini mission. And so what I believed I was unlocking, let's see if that was true, with that technology should be, so I've got the retrograde section in here with the solid deorbiting engines. So I've got these Gemini RCS. I totally will want that. Or that might not be the FASA part, but regardless. No, that is a nuke re-entry. So maybe it's in one of these menus. I'm looking for the life support section, because that is what I want. I want a fuel cell, and I want a main engine for my Gemini. Sorry, usually I kind of, in the past I kind of would, as the episodes of this series got more and more complex, I'd have a couple of jotted notes and kind of be talking through them, kind of look at them and talk through them as I made the video, and I just haven't gotten back to that habit yet. So I apologize for the scatterbrain nature of some of my talk in the past couple, but I will get back to talking about how are we planning to get to the moon in a little bit. But I definitely do want to use Gemini. I guess that's the one quick thing I can say. I would like to use Gemini hardware rather than Apollo hardware to get our first people at least into orbit of the moon. Okay, so I'm not seeing the piece I want. Maybe it's just my brain being rusty again and not seeing it, not recalling exactly which menu it's in. I'm looking for the Gemini service. Oh, maybe it's in engines, now that I think about it. It might get tagged because it does potentially technically have an engine in it, or at least one of the versions does. I'm not seeing it in here either, but again, I might be blind and everybody might be yelling at me. TransStage is definitely a piece of technology I want to use. Man, look at that purchase cost, right? Usually I just kind of gloss over and say, yes, I saw the purchase cost and then cheated it because I think that's unfair. But man, look at that. I'd have to do a lot of other missions in order to just use that, which might not even be enough for, say, a lunar flyby, as an example. I would need plenty of other technology to be able to do that. So I'm not seeing that in here. I apologize for making everybody look while I look. So let me go check the tech tree. Maybe I'll be able to find that. All right, there we go. To the R&D. So I unlock electrics, we can just take instrumentation, electrics. See, these are the parts I'm looking for. Oh man, they're expensive. And that's part of one of the problems of using, that still exists with using FASA in RP-0 with entry costs. The entry costs are still high because in part, they're anchored or actually literally researched from actual, historical entry costs, but the career mode hasn't been set up to provide you cash for these kind of one-use things. Because if you think about what this, so if you actually know what these are, say, so this is the service module for Gemini. It has fuel tanks, it has itty-bitty engines, which are basically like large RCS engines for moving the Gemini around. So for close range docking with another thing, or even to make orbital changes, so you can actually get into close range and dock with another craft. So really, it's just you could do that with real fuel tanks. You could do that with RCS things, and it has a fuel cell in it, say, which is similar to the fuel cell here, where you bring up liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, and it kind of acts like a battery because it turns those things, if you think of them as battery chemicals, into a substantial amount of electricity, which is awesome. So rather than using solar panels or ridiculously large batteries, you use something like this. And it also has the side benefit of producing water, which in this case is, let me look at it in here. So the history of it is interesting, and I went through the research for actually configuring parts like this. Back when I did that, there we go. So in Gemini were the first craft by America to use fuel cells to generate electricity. And it doesn't create the nicest water. In fact, the Gemini astronauts were not going to be relying on the water produced by the fuel cell to drink. And even the Apollo astronauts, once that technology had been built and used in Gemini, refined, and then used in Apollo, they didn't like the water that much either, because it ends up with a bunch of gas bubbles in it, and gassy drinks in space aren't very nice on your body. So there's something that looks weird. The electric charge, maybe those are just really large numbers, like it's n out of n. It's like a super battery. It kind of looks like a super battery because it just has a huge amount of electric capacity, which very well may be right and realistic. And this one, no, it also has those as well. Yeah. Okay. So those are the parts I'm looking for, and I didn't see in the lab, so I'll go back and look for them. But yeah, there's a number of cool parts I unlocked in here. One of the funnest is ScanSat, because now I have a reason to send little craft into the orbit of Mars or Venus or other planets, so I can start gathering this information, both for science and for potential future missions. Because right now we don't know really anything about Venus in our career mode here. We haven't been able to look under the clouds. We just know it's a cloudy planet. The clouds don't look very nice, but we don't have any information about the surface, and this would provide us a lot of information about the surface of Venus. So these are all the parts. So this is what we waited to unlock, and it would cost $500,000 funds in order to unlock, which is twice what I currently have. So it's kind of the struggle. I definitely would love to play RP-0 with entry costs, because it kind of does add a more realistic challenge where you make a choice. Do I go down this engine line? Are these the things I'm going to be researching, investing in and building now, or this other line? But currently they're not very well tuned for play. You kind of have to either select certain difficulty options where you do have the money for entry costs, even though they're very high, or completely different settings which don't give you nearly as much money for contracts, and also therefore because you're not having to cover the costs of entry costs. So anyways, so I'm going to give another quick look for these parts, and if I don't see them right now, I don't see them, fair enough. I just thought I could quickly build up a real Gemini. Actually, now that I say that out loud, let's see if in the vehicle list here I simply have Gemini. So it might be blocked out in saying, sorry, you haven't unlocked all the parts for that yet, but that's okay. There we go, FASA Type 2, Gemini stock. So it might be a little angry at me because I don't have this part unlocked, but there we go. This is basically what I want to end up building, other than it's going to be angry about an engine, because this engine behaves strangely sometimes. It should actually be that one, and there we go. It just doesn't save that config because we've had fights with the technology behind the configs for this engine in RP-0, or in Realism Overhaul. But yeah, so with the high thrust weight ratio of these stages, that's actually enough delta V to push this beautiful and large payload of 3.5 plus tons to orbit, which is one of my favorite spacecraft ever built. It's because of all the amazing manned firsts, duration, spacewalk, docking, etc. Even coupling it with another engine and sending it into medium Earth orbit. They were the people furthest away from the surface of the Earth in one of the later Gemini missions. So I definitely recommend looking and researching the Gemini missions because they're absolutely astounding. So this is the craft that I intend to use for a whole bunch of crewed missions. See, we're not going to be able to fit 3 people in it, but we can, there are a number of ways we can actually achieve that using this. We can definitely keep people up for more than 3 days. This one, same with hitting a higher altitude, that might be possible, because if one node of our orbit is high, the low node will be faster. So potentially we could achieve that. Not sure why we didn't get spacewalk. Don't know offhand. Fair enough. So have to look into that, but we can certainly perform that. And I don't know why that one's not complete, because I definitely just did a mission to Mars. But anyway, might be because I didn't transmit like 0 science data while I was in orbit of Mars, or near Mars. So even though that would have completed this contract, just not got me any science. So I might have flubbed that. Well, I'll have to look into that. But anyway, this is the next craft with crew that I plan to send up. It will be a full-on Gemini with an engine, so it can achieve precision orbits. It can turn liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen into amazing electricity to keep them up there a long time. And ultimately, I'd like to use this Gemini capsule for moon missions. So I've still got the time that I'd want to so I can discuss potential route to the moon. So I do intend to do, to put Gemini into orbit of the moon, first off. So that would basically mean, so this rocket will get this payload into orbit of Earth. So I could say use this Titan, send this into orbit, and have it dock with something like a Centaur Transstage. So that would be just like the Apollo. I definitely need to reduce the number of rockets I have in this list here, because it's so hard to actually pull something out. But let's see. So remember when I tested Atlas Centaur? There we go. So if I put a docking module on this, rather than just kind of a dummy package, if I attach the Centaur to a docking module, which allowed it to dock with Gemini, it could potentially throw it towards the moon, and potentially with another package as well that would either allow it to just fly by the moon or drop into orbit of the moon and return. So that's what I'm planning to that's what I intend to be designing next. Will be either a one launch, so I could use, say, a Saturn 1 or a larger vehicle than that to send Gemini around the moon or potentially into orbit of the moon and back. And beyond that, I kind of need to decide whether I want to do, so there's a couple different options. There's Gemini Direct. Let me see if I can find you again. Type 2, there we go. So with Gemini Direct, this actual Gemini capsule at the top would fly off of the Earth into low Earth orbit, would be thrown towards the moon, and would even be lowered to the surface of the moon. So you would have an actual package that would look like something like it's kind of like a straight-walled version of this. It actually exists in FASA, although I don't know if it's been precisely configured for that. Might not be in here. Anyway, I'll have to dig around. But it basically is like this, but straighter, like more straight-walled. So I could build a big old Gemini that could actually take this capsule all the way down to the surface of the moon and return it to Earth. That would require a very large launcher, like something on the class of a Saturn V, which I haven't built. I haven't unlocked the F1 engine, and I haven't made progress towards that. The F1 is a huge engine. The Saturn V used 5 of them. Each of those engines has about as much thrust as that Saturn 1 that I built previously, and the Saturn 1 is the biggest thing I've ever built. So that would require a very large lifter, and so you have basically the same payload requirements. So a Saturn V can do Apollo as it was historically done, where one launch from Earth on a Saturn V and then lunar orbit rendezvous. So you send 2 people into the little LEM, those 2 people are sent down to the surface of the moon and return to orbit of the moon with the LEM, with part of the LEM remaining, get back into the Apollo hardware, and return to Earth. So Saturn V can do that, sending 2 people to the surface of the moon, leaving 1 person in orbit of the moon. With Gemini, because Gemini is much smaller and only carries the 2 people, because of those, the mass of this actual payload kind of goes through the mass of this payload goes through the math in so many steps that because you're only sending 2 people and the life support supplies for just 2 people, a Saturn V could actually launch a craft capable of a direct landing of a Gemini on the surface of the moon and return them. And that's a path I'm seriously considering. I do like the idea of an intermediate vehicle, though. So another option I have would be potentially launching multiple vehicles smaller than Saturn, like a Saturn C3, which would have 2 F1 engines instead of 5, launching that vehicle and potentially another vehicle like a Saturn 1 or Saturn IB to the orbit of the Earth, kind of docking multiple parts of a payload together, which would also allow you to do direct landing on the moon. So you do Earth orbit rendezvous, you construct something in orbit of the Earth, and then you would land basically the same thing as the Saturn V would launch on the moon. And that means you don't have to go through the costly development process of a Saturn V. And I like that idea, because I like the idea of leaving the development of a Saturn V until later in the space program, so it can be developed to be a bit more capable, specifically where the upper stage is more insulated, so you can use it to store fuel in orbit for later missions to Mars or Venus. So I like that idea as well. But I could potentially build a Saturn V, and then the Saturn V kind of gets, like a Saturn V-B, where it has those capabilities. So those are both options I'm seriously considering. And another option, you could do with smaller lifters, or like a Saturn C3, where you basically do the exact same thing as the Apollo program, just with Gemini. So Gemini sends 2 people to the orbit of the moon, and then sends 1 or 2 of them down in a separate lander that also came on that same rocket. So a number of options. And I still kind of need to plan what do I find most interesting, as well as what's not going to require like a ton of new design and construction from me. Because ultimately I only have so much time that I'm able to kind of dedicate to into playing KSP. So I need to kind of pick a middle ground where it's both interesting and not going to take a huge amount of my time. So that basically spells out all of our options. But this is going to be the next craft to take people to orbit of the Earth, and then we can do some other fun stuff. So let's just build this. Actually, cancel. I don't think it will let me build this. Let me see. So the last one was the Gemini 3, I believe. Oh, I must have caps lock on already. There we go. So let us see if launch, build, it shouldn't. Oh, it did. Weird. So for some reason, it let me build that even though I hadn't paid unlock costs. And look, so this vehicle was able to put 2 people into orbit of the Earth for quite a long time, for 2 weeks, and it only costs 20,000 credits, or funds, or whatever you want to call them. In comparison, cluster stand costs almost twice as much as that, and for good reasons. So notice this is 157 tons, all told, with launcher and payload, and this craft is weird. Why is it not showing? Oh, it didn't load. Right. Sorry, I must have mucked something up. Cluster stand. Where are you, cluster stand? Load. It didn't load correctly. But anyway, that craft, as you saw in there, is much more expensive and is just a much heavier rocket. And we're going to have to build rockets that are more like that than like this, to actually send people even just to the orbit of the moon, let alone to the surface of the moon. So we've got a lot of challenging designs and missions ahead of us. So I look forward to that. Thanks for watching RP-0 America. Goodbye.